This is Orlando Sentinel Now.
Hello, it's Wednesday, March 2nd. Rich Pope here with Caroline Catherman and Trevor Frazier. And today we're going to talk about the federal vaccine mandate for many hospital workers has passed. We'll find out what that means. Also, we're going to take a look at Apopka as development looms. Some concerns there from longtime residents. All right, Caroline, we're going to start here with you on the federal mandate for vaccination work for many of the hospital workers. And that passed on Monday. What do we know at this point?
In November, the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services essentially said to hospitals, any hospital that wanted to receive that funding, hey, you need to vaccinate all of your hospital staff or get a valid exemption, which the only exemptions are for medical or religious reasons. And I will say it's not just hospitals, it's healthcare centers, it's anywhere that receives Medicaid, Medicare funding. So that was all the way back in November. A series of legal challenges by Florida included has, continuously paused this, delayed the deadline, but finally in January, the Supreme Court said, hey, the Centers for Medicaid has a right to enforce this. So, the deadline to get a first shot was earlier in February. The deadline to get a second shot for all staff or get a valid exemption recorded, February 28th. So it's going to be a really interesting time. Technically, they are just checking for compliance now. So say that a hospital's at like 90%, but with plans to get to 100%, they're going to give them, like 30 more days before they actually start invoking penalties, which could include fines, which would ultimately be termination from the Medicare and Medicaid program. They wouldn't be able to receive funding anymore. But essentially, this is a mandate that has been a long time coming, and the deadline's finally here. We're finally seeing progress on it.
Yeah, as far as numbers, do we know anything about how numbers are here in the region, hospitals and medical staffs?
Yeah, so I mean, for hospitals alone, and this probably just only touches the surface, but there's around 60,000 workers between Advent Health, all their Central Florida hospitals, and Orlando Health. And that's really just the region's or the Orlando area's two largest hospitals. I couldn't even begin to account for health centers that receive Medicaid, smaller hospital chains that, take Medicaid and reimburse that funding. So it is a significant amount of Orlando's workforce.
It's interesting too. You mentioned this, a lot of legal battles happened, and it seems like at this point, the state has said they're not going to really police these hospitals as whether they're complying with this mandate.
That's what's incredibly interesting about this. And we're definitely going to need to follow this as it unfolds because the federal mandate puts the state government in charge of serving for compliance and reporting back to the government which hospitals have complied and, vaccinated or gotten exemptions for everyone. But then the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration is saying they're not going to do that. There's also a law that was enacted in November by DeSantis, which essentially pretty much makes this vaccine mandate in hospitals like illegal in Florida. And, technically that law still exists. It's not like they really announced we're repealing this law. Federal law is supposed to take precedence over state law. But this is a really interesting situation because if the state isn't checking whether they're following federal law, but they are checking whether they're following state law, and maybe hospitals are going to end up still getting fined by the state. And I think there's a lot of legal battles still to come, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And another thing you point to with your article is just the confusion. It seems like there's this sliding scale of what the risk is. And it seems like these numbers that are for COVID numbers are starting to hit the point where it's manageable here in the region and that number that they're trying to hit. So it's interesting as they start to try to police this vaccination mandate.
Yeah, the thing with that is pretty much everyone I've talked to says there's going to be another variant. It did not end with Omicron. So even though things are calm right now, stuff like vaccination and protecting the community long term is probably still wise, even though we don't see an immediate threat, like there very well will be another variant that could be more severe, could be even more contagious. So it's not, I think the mandate is still very much relevant.
All right, interesting story right now on OrlandoSentinel.com. You can go ahead and check that out. Appreciate that. All right, Trevor. So we're going to talk about Apopka, and it looks like some longtime residents concerned about development. Why so?
First, to understand, everybody acknowledges that development is coming to Apopka. Concerned or not, there's really sort of no way of stopping this. Apopka is Orange County's second largest city, as we all know, but it has always been a sort of rural outlier to Orlando. It used to be a lot of horse and ranching. It is still known as the indoor foliage capital of the world, I believe. So it has always had that feel of sort of a smaller rural community. It is starting to grow. Over the past 30 years, Apopka grew from 13,000 residents to about 54,000 residents, so almost 4 times the amount. Now, that's a sort of actually steady rate. If you go back 30 years before that, the population just about quadrupled over that period. Well, in the next 3 to 5 years, there are new developments coming to the city that have the potential to add an extra 22,000 residents. That's in the next 3 to 5 years. That's about 50% of the current population, little less, added in just that time. So it is definitely about to explode a lot more. And there are residents there who grew up in that small rural town, like we talked about, who are just worried that this kind of increase is going to take away from the small town feel that they always knew. And they say that, it's noticeable now.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that it's the second largest city, with Orlando being the first, that it hasn't experienced this growth already. And it looks like this Western Beltway, the completion of that, which has been coming for many years, seems to be what's really spurring this.
Yes, 429 definitely had a major impact on the development of Apopka. This sort of development has been planned and coming for quite some time. Talking to residents there, they talk about how they first started noticing it really filling up in about the early 2000s. One resident who said that he remembers when there were only 3 stoplights entirely in all of Apopka. The first time that he ever witnessed what he called a traffic jam, which was not everybody getting through a red light or getting through the green light at one go. And he was like, that was one of the most impressive things I had ever seen in Apopka. I never thought we'd have a traffic jam here. But residents like that say that, yeah, that kind of crowding and seeing all of these new people coming in, they're not against new people. They really want people to be part of the community. They just don't think that they're going to have the thing where all of your neighbors, you can just say hi to everybody. Everybody's just kind of helping each other out. They're worried that that's gonna diminish. And to be fair, even Jim Hitt, the community development director for the city, says that it'll be almost impossible to maintain a small town feel once it's a larger town, once it has this kind of growth in it. This sort of growth is happening in a lot of the outer areas of Orlando right now, sort of exacerbated by the super hot housing market that has been pushing home prices and rent prices up in the Orlando metro. To that point, Apopka isn't necessarily cheaper than Orlando. The average home price at Apopka was actually a little higher than the median for Orlando overall. The average rent prices were very close to the average rent prices in Orlando. And part of that might be because there was in Apopka very few places to rent until recently. They are just now starting to build a lot of multifamily apartments. When I talked to older residents and I asked them, when you were growing up, did you know anyone in Apopka who lived in apartments? None of them did. None of them could recall a single person that they knew that lived in an apartment building in Apopka. But now there are major ones. There are going to be hundreds and hundreds of multifamily units that are going to be coming over this next period, and bringing in a lot of renters, often younger people, young professionals, and so on, coming to the area who are going to be working in the whether it's the industrial warehouses that are being put out by 429, or whether it's in those indoor foliage places or other businesses that are taking off in Apopka right now. But they are coming, and they are basically, everybody knows that it's going to fill up, that it's going to change, and they just want to make sure that it changes in a way that everybody's comfortable with.
Yeah, really interesting look there from Trevor on OrlandoSentinel.com. Trevor, this is part of an ongoing series that you're working on. Tell us what that entails and what we can look forward to.
Well, the series is focusing on that move out of the city, the expansion of the suburbs and the outer areas around Orlando as people look for new housing opportunities, and some of the conflicts that causes as they move into older communities.
All right. Well, interesting look online on OrlandoSentinel.com, and look forward to more from Trevor on that one. But for us, we're going to go ahead and call it quits. Appreciate you guys being with us. Want to point out, go to OrlandoSentinel.com/subscribe and support our work. We always do appreciate that. But for us, we're going to push pause. Until next time, I'm Rich, Trevor, and Caroline. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you soon.
Watch Orlando Sentinel Now live every weekday at noon on our Facebook page and on OrlandoSentinel.com.